Hello and welcome to the Digital EDU Dialogues podcast. I am Angela Britcher, and joining me today is Professor Heather Tidwell from Harrisburg University. Welcome, Heather.
Hi.
Well, it's always so good to see you, and you are such a creative and interactive teacher. You call yourself an education disruptor. And while we are colleagues at Harrisburg, what got my attention is all the things that you post about being really creative in getting your students engaged and active in their learning. And so I'm really excited to share some of the ways that you do that, because while you do that a lot in person, you also do this online. And I think you've got a lot of creative ideas to share with other instructors. So let's start with talking about being a disruptor and talk about your background and how you bring that attitude of disruption to modern higher education.
Sure. So, for those who do not know me, I have been in the Central PA area pretty much my whole life. Went to Susquehanna Township, Penn State Harrisburg, and then Penn State World Campus, and currently doing a doctoral program through Wilmington. So I have been in this area, and we know the culture and our people are very much of, are you East Shore or West Shore? Who do you know? Who do you not know? What have you been involved with? And all of that. So bringing that personality to who I am is such a huge part of my conversation, as being able to think through, okay, so I'm someone who sold cars. Like, I sold cars, but don't ask me to jump a car because I can't do it. But there's some of that level of it to, how do you become successful in selling a car? Well, you do it by being different, but also being present. And through that, it molded into a lot of other ways in my life, to how I questioned moving forward. At one point in my career, I was at this point of, I'd been working 60, 70 hours a week in the car business, was doing really well for myself, but then still felt like I'm young and didn't have enough time to go on a date. So had to really think through what it was that I wanted to do to move to the next level of my education, and was so involved with nonprofits, Harrisburg Young Professionals, Junior Achievement, Girl on the Run, and was doing all of these cool things, and was like, okay, so you know what? How do you bring all of that together to lead me into being the community ambassador for Mission Barbecue? And that is a whole different whirlwind itself. You know, how do you become the person who's slinging barbecue from selling cars? You really don't. You just kind of just go with the flow. And that level of connection, being connected to our community and what it needed. And that really then showed on to how I promote myself in social media to gain the attention of Harrisburg University, for them to actually, they asked me to come in at the beginning to do English because I'm a grant writer. But then it molded into more of civics and entrepreneurialism and all of these different ideas about promoting yourself, promoting your brand, but then being something different. And I just wasn't okay with the status quo of read, go, paper, and wanted to see our students be comfortable in that position of empowerment of themselves. We can't just allow the next generation just to go out and get their only interaction through a video screen or through a TV or through social media. Being able to say, you are allowed to be here. You have every right to be a part of this. And if the status quo doesn't fit what you think it should, question it. And so being able to say to our students, hey, look, you have an issue with this. This is what you need to do, following the proper channels. And if that's your local government, if that's your business, if that's your campus, whatever it is, you still have the power to make a change. One person does matter.
Heather, you make several good points there. And the first thing I want to acknowledge is just how well you know your students and how important this is, whether we're teaching in person or online, that we know the community of students that we are talking to. And so, how important it is for you that you have lived in the area where you teach and you understand what the student population needs and what the community needs from its learners. We keep hearing from schools that are successful right now that they are shopping in their own backyards. They are marketing to students and businesses in their region. So, I think the more that we as instructors can be a part of that movement, I think it's great for our students and it's great for our communities. And also how you role model disruption from your own career experience and how you bring that to students and then say, all right, we're going to work on questioning things. We're going to work on saying the status quo isn't working. And so let's question it and let's make a change. And that you are doing that within your classroom as an instructor, but then also within your content areas. So let's shift a little bit and talk about your courses and how you sort of operationalize that sense of disruption. I want you to share about what you do in your civics class, because I think this is so fantastic and you have seen such great results from your students that I think go way beyond their classroom experience. So share the kind of assignments you have your students do in your civics class.
Sure. So when I first started at Harrisburg University, I was brought in as an adjunct, like I mentioned, but I was actually working for Cumberland County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. So was going to meetings and would have to present on XYZ grant that this municipality went for, or being able to present to the county commissioners a action plan and things like that. And I found that the students wanted to know what I was doing. And so I would start playing the meetings that I was presenting at to them, but then realized they started asking questions. For example, there was a meeting that was right around when the Hamas issues started to happen, and they offered a moment of silence at the beginning of the meeting. And a student questioned this: is this really a good example of separation of church and state? And it launched a really interesting conversation that I didn't even plan on, but starting to think, okay, so they are having some questions about this. And that was when I started using this pivot of being able to attend municipal meetings for credit. So while the first semester I did it, I got the idea midway through the semester and just said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to try this. Try it with me. I knew my population of students, I had 22 in the class, and a lot of them were curious about things that were going on, especially, in Newville and in Harrisburg. And they were seeing all these things in the news because they were already doing current event assignments. So we'll come back to current event. But then I was like, okay, you know what? Let's do this. If you go to a municipal meeting, I will give you credit and you don't have to do a paper. And students are like, wait, what? You can do that? I was like, well, yeah, I can do it. It's my class. Why can't I do it? So they would go to these meetings and I would ask them to send me a picture of the room and send me a picture of the agenda showing that if they needed to sign in, that they signed in, and had a list of places that students could go that I knew these people would allow them to attend even though they weren't residents. So I have to give a shout out and a thank you to the Dauphin County Commissioners, the Cumberland County Commissioners, the Perry County Commissioners, as well as Dillsburg, Newville, Mechanicsburg Borough, Harrisburg. Was just like, students, young people who want to actually be a part of this, come on in, and welcomed them, but then also asked them questions at the end. And then the students would come back and they were like, you're never going to guess. They wanted to know our opinion on things. Like, are we covering the topics? Are we doing this right? Is it too confusing? And we got asked this and we don't even live there. And seeing that was so cool. So then to the next semester, I started it from the very beginning. And there was a group of them, of 12 of them, that every Tuesday would go meeting hopping. And they went from meeting to meeting and then would go out to dinner afterwards as a group. I didn't go to any of these meetings with them. I didn't facilitate any of it. And then in the next class, the part of the assignment was, so you went to the meeting, but now you have to tell the class what happened and kind of what did you feel, what did you learn? And some of the stuff they were talking about, students are like, wait, what happened? This is here? Like, why isn't the news covering it? Why isn't this happening? And it started this questioning to the point that I had a student who went to a commissioner meeting and demanded the commissioners question if it was really an open meeting. If somebody couldn't get into the building that was handicap accessible and they had to pay to park, is it truly an open meeting? What? Like, you're sitting there and you're like, how is this happening? But this is what they did, and this is what they demanded as citizens of this area. Hey, we have to start thinking through this. And just seeing this grow and evolve to the students now still go to meetings even because they don't have to for class assignment, but that they want to be involved. They want to be ingrained in it. And especially they're like, before I move somewhere as an adult, I'm going to a meeting to find out if the borough or the township supports their people. Because if they don't, I don't want to move there. And you don't see that on a Zillow listing. So there's some cool things that's going on there. But another big part of it is the current event assignment. So I was watching the Queen's funeral and was at home and was one of those moments where you go, okay, this is something big that's happening in our lifetime. But to see how the news was covering it. And I thought it was interesting as I was sitting there and watching it. And I'm like, they're going to talk about who's sitting next to who, who's wearing what. And is that really the important thing that needed to be discussed at that moment? Or were there other things that should have been covered? And started actually having these conversations in an online class setting of, are we paying attention to what we should be paying attention to? Which then built into, okay, this is your history, this is your story, and you're reading a bias. And what is that bias really look like? As you can see information that's coming out, but you're involved with it because you were at the meeting or you were at location, or this is something that you knew about. Is it coming across the way that it should be? And taking that information to allow students to make the decisions on their own. So many students tell me that they don't feel comfortable having political conversations because in their home, it's a very charged negative conversation. It's like that taboo that we had from our generation of, you can't talk about politics at Thanksgiving because somebody's going to end up in a food fight. They have this too extreme because of how much politics is really pushing that forward. And so being able to question the methods, but think through it on their own in a safe environment gets them that idea of being able to, hey, so why do we not like this person who's running for politics? Or why is this seat being open? I can't really find the research on it. Can we have a conversation about it? And especially civics is the beautiful thing that it always gives me something to teach. So from being able to have a new chair of a board, to being able to go into a presidential election, to being able to see like a primary set and all the people that are running for it for a specific seat. But why is so many people running for it for a seat? And just having all of that, it gives them that well-roundedness of, oh, nobody's telling me that.
Yeah. And as I hear you talk, realizing that you've created the laboratories, these safe places for students to experiment. So they get to experiment with local politics, right? Maybe even before they're old enough to vote. I've certainly had 17-year-olds in my class, or as they are just starting to get engaged in local politics and to understand the importance of local politics in their lives. And what that municipal meeting means for them, or what that school board meeting means for them. So you've provided these safe labs for them to experiment, to question, and for them to be on the receiving end of hearing that their voice matters, right? How many times do we hear from students or even from teenagers, college-age students, that they feel like it doesn't matter in their lives, or that their opinion isn't necessarily valuable yet? And so for them to go to a meeting, have a real experience with real people and be able to share their thoughts and be heard, what an incredible experience that will inform their choices as, adults, as voters, as consumers, but also their participation in their local communities and how they can be a contributing member of society. And I want you to talk a little bit about how you have students who were creating an esports app and how you had them use that as part of an exploration of government and what that means, because we have a lot of esports and esports management students. And so talk about how you incorporated, that STEM field into local government.
Sure. So especially with being in a STEM university, some of the stuff the students are doing are so beyond progressive that you're like, where did you come up with this? And so I had students who were interested in doing an esports betting app, very similar to like a gambling casino sports betting kind of thing, but specifically just for esports, but didn't ever think about the fact that betting in a lot of places is illegal still. So there are certain states, like Pennsylvania is very progressive with it, that you can do it on the phone, but as soon as you are outside of Pennsylvania, you can't do that anymore. And so having to go through the process of, well, are you from Pennsylvania? Are you keeping this in Pennsylvania? Because Pennsylvania is not traditionally known for having a lot of esports following here. But if you're going to do this, it has to be in a state that the actual law is able to give you the access to do it. And they had never thought about that because they thought, oh, well, it's anywhere. That's true. It is, but you can't do it everywhere. And so there's that level of being able to have those conversations of what do you want to do? And have you thought about the fact that is your area going to be supportive of that? There's a lot of concerns with some of the students are doing very scientific projects about using material to 3D print. So like recycling stuff to 3D print off of it. But depending on what they're making, they have to go through different thought processes of the legal actions and ramifications in the government side of it. If you are building a 3D printed car part, is the Pennsylvania standard for emissions allowing that car part to be put on a car? And so you have to be able to do that research part of it too, of, okay, well, I want to do this. Is the law supporting me? And if it's not, how do you change the law? Because sometimes it is behind. And we have to be able to think through that as well. I do one of those examples where you go through the list of old state laws that seem a little hokey. And that starts that conversation. Like there's still the part where you have to disable your car if there's a horse and buggy on the road. I don't know how to do that. So there's parts of that we have to think through with the students on, these are still laws. These are still things in place. So you have to be willing to say, they may not be as progressive as we think they should be. And pushing that forward, but knowing that where they find the information is factual or not is huge too.
Yeah, and you've just made the case for why we need humanities courses like civics in any kind of program, whether it's STEM or business, that why it's so important that we have this understanding of basic government and how students are going to use it practically in their careers and their future. I think it's also a great transition to talk about the entrepreneurship course that you teach and some of the practical things that you include in that class and bring it to life for students. So if you talk a little bit about that course.
Sure. So the first time I actually taught the entrepreneurial mind class, I had someone who was a CEO, president, started a nonprofit for a youth group in the area. It is the Link for Youth over in New Cumberland, and had Sandra come in and talk to the students about her experience of starting this endeavor And it connected with the students because she's serving those that are in high school. So she was able to say, okay, well, this is what I see. And they're so close to that. They were like, well, yeah, I could feel that for sure. And talked about how it started in her living room. And at one point she shows up to her house and there's 55 kids chilling in her living room. And she's like, who wants food? So starting to being able to go with that. And then the process of, she went from her house to they were doing stuff at a park to being able to get a brick and mortar, and that ups and downs and processes of it was huge for her. And the students really connected with that beyond what I was just saying, because it was something that they knew. They knew that in their schools, there were kids that were going hungry, and there were kids that were coming in that didn't have clean clothes. And it wasn't really in the social norms to ask them, but had questions on, okay, well, how do I help them? And then finding out, there are organizations out there. It's not like the high school system really supports them being able to be curious on helping their friends. So this was a big thing on being able to show an entrepreneur in our neighborhood doing something a lot of them had felt needed to happen, but didn't know it was already happening. So from there, then, was able to take a lot more of these practical ideas. And this is when the whole loan shark Barbie came out of that. I managed a lot of stuff when you're looking at the grants and the loans and trying to help local businesses survive and thrive. But then, if you get a loan for your business to be able to expand, what happens when you put your house on collateral and you didn't make the payment because you didn't actually open in time? Or what happens if you get a brick and mortar and you show up day one and there's a tree in your roof, which because of the recent storms kind of feels a little practical right now. So thinking through some of these examples about, okay, so how are you able to work within what you need? And especially thinking and exposing students to, this is what a loan is. This is what a grant is. This is also what a stock versus a crypto is. And being able to have realistic thought process of, okay, you have $1,000. That $1,000 isn't going to get you very far. How can we be able to do things to maximize that money, but minimize the risk? And show students a list of, they get to pick their cryptos or their stocks and what it is today, what it has been this week, what it's been for a month, and what it's been for a year, to see if there was really that up and down part of it. But then thinking through, okay, well, if I put that $1,000 in crypto and the company is a company that's not really a company and they just took my money and never bought my crypto, there's nothing to hold feet to the fire. So I may get lucky and get tons of money back, but I also may get unlucky and lose it all. And so there's a lot of that thought process that we have to think through too. But how do you do that in a way that's not concrete?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think providing students those examples and real people in their community, having had those experiences, is as well as sharing with them, things within their reach, right? Instead of bringing in the head of a bank, bringing in the head of an organization that students can really and truly relate to and share their experiences with. And kind of along those lines, I want to switch gears and I want to shift to talking about self-care and mental health. We know this is number one on the minds of so many of our students. And it's really important to you to provide an example of self-care. You post about it on social media, you share it with your students. So if you could talk about the importance of just being open with students as well as taking breaks and how you encourage them to take care of themselves.
Sure. So, how I started at the beginning and saying, I worked 60, 70 hours a week in a business that was very unforgiving. Once you were at work, you didn't leave work. If you were going for lunch, you were possibly losing money. And it's a very hard environment to transition from when you're so used to, I got to go, because especially if I microwave my lunch and somebody walks in, it's probably ruined. So that thought process was really an adjustment for me to come out of. And then, through my times and my different roles, and especially with my own mental health, I had to start kind of focusing in on myself. And I tell students, and most of the students actually already really know this about me, but I have high anxiety. I have a lot of depressional battles, and I also have suicidal tendencies. And being able to say to the students up front, hey, look, my anxiety, I cannot handle it today. So I just need you to just roll with me and understand that I'm just not there. Or they're adjusting my medication, or being able to shift myself over a little bit. And they have to see it in an adult to be able to appreciate it in themselves. So I do a lot of things with them about how do I take care of myself? And, you can't, the old saying on the plane, you have to put your life vest on before you can help somebody else. And I know there are times that my life vest is on and it's just sitting there with a bunch of holes. And recognizing that in myself and saying, okay, hey, I'm not doing okay. And I'm not sure why I'm not doing okay, but I'm taking the steps to realize that I have to be in a situation of healthy environment around people that support me and love me, but also at the same time in a place that I feel wanted and feel needed. So how am I able to create those healthy hobbies in fostering that mindset myself? So I do a lot of reading, and I do, a lot of going on walks or being able to learn something new. And especially, as you can see, like I have a blanket here. I had a student who was a crochet queen, and that was how she was able to cope with just the world. She would slow down and crochet. And so you sit there and you go, I approve of this. That is something that, it takes time. It takes effort. I could never do it. So how did I support it? I said, you know what? I'm always cold. So if you want to make me a blanket, I'd be happy to have it. And how many times people see me walking around this campus with this blanket wrapped around me because it's freezing in here.
Yes.
But that is that realization of being healthy and supporting them in their efforts. I've got little frogs. Then somebody did paper mache little frogs and then would hide them around the university so that students would find them. But it was something for them. They could sit there and they could play and they could make them. And it was just getting their mind out of their element and being able to let go for a few minutes. So I especially try to make sure, it's okay to have a lunch break.
Yes.
Do not sit at your desk and eat lunch. You are not getting paid for lunch. You have to eat. So getting up and removing yourself, whether it's, down the hall or if it's upstairs on the patio or if it's taking a walk, and if you are somebody who packs a lunch and you don't really have an option at your work on where you can go and eat, that's not your desk. Okay, then when you're done with your food, you take your trash and you take it outside. So that way you're still removing yourself from your computer and being able to take those couple of minutes to just refresh your mind before you move on with the day is such a habit that I think that we are just not really pushing into our next generation. So they had to learn in front of a computer. They had to do a work session. And so how do you really do that and still be a kid? And they come into the classroom still feeling like they have to eat breakfast while they're in class because they just didn't have that structure to their setup yet. Or they're eating lunch while they're because they're trying to go talk to people on their 20-minute lunch break while they're getting food and doing this and doing that. So being able to say, okay, hey, I'm okay with you eating in this class. I'm okay with you participating in this. But as you move on into adulthood, you should really try to get that separation in there and taking those moments to realize that it's okay to take yourself first.
Yeah, you role model that so well, that idea of getting out of your space for lunch, getting away from your desk and just making sure that there's that separation time that's not about work, that's not about checking email while you're eating. I love to talk to students about what we're consuming, right? So what are we consuming in addition to food? What media are we consuming? What news and information are we consuming? And so when we can step away from our laptops or our phones and just, experience that time away and take a step back during the day is crucial. And you role model that very well. I think another thing that I think is important that you and I have talked about is that you are so open and sharing with your students about what's happening for you. And you do that by showing up. So you come to class even though it's a hard day, and we'll share with them, this is what's happening for me today, and I'm here, and we're going to make it work. And I think that's such a great lesson. While there are days that we all need to say, whoa, I need a day, I think we can also role model that I can do this day with this, with what I'm holding, and I'm going to surround myself with support, and I'm going to role model the behaviors that I need so that I can show up and do my job and do work today while, maybe it's not my best day. And I think you role model that very well. And I think is a great example to our students that, show up, because you never know who's going to be there to support you when you show up as well.
Right. And it's one of those things where I'm the worst example of it sometimes as well, because the end of last fall semester, the last day of class, I was passing a kidney stone and still came and taught class. And I was like, how did you do that? I was like, I was laying on the floor. But if I was at home, I was going to be worse because I was in so much pain and wasn't able to function. I knew if I stayed home, I was in a worse place for myself. So showing up and just saying, hey, look, I'm not good right now, kids. I'm passing a kidney stone. And they're all like, wait, what? And I'm like, yes. But making that effort to show up, and especially if you have those really bad depression days, get up, take a shower, put some shoes on, put an outfit on, get out of the pajamas. Do not put on dirty pajamas. Put on some clothes and go and just walk. And you know what? And especially if somebody who's around you enough will go, are you okay? That's okay to say, you know what? I'm not, but I really don't want to talk about it. I'm trying to keep going. Dory and her just keep swimming. You've pushing yourself to just try to remove something. And how can we do that and show the next group of people that it's okay if we can't do that ourselves?
Yeah. Yes. Heather, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing both your ideas for creating really active and engaging learning experiences, as well as how we can be really positive role models for our students when it comes to self-care. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure. And especially, if I can leave on any last mark, be okay with trying something different, especially if it's not fully thought out or if it's not really everything you need it to be. It's okay to be not okay, but it's also getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and learning different ways to inquire students to think things through on their own. We can teach people how to learn. We may not teach them something that they're going to remember forever, but if we gave them a healthy habit to be able to pick up on for their lifestyle, why not?
Great advice for us as instructors as well as for our students. Thank you, Heather.
Today's episode is brought to you by Professor Services. Looking for a job in teaching? Need to expand your network? Want to boost your income? Whatever it is, the expert team at Professor Services has you covered. From helping higher ed faculty find new jobs, to essential tools such as cover letters and CVs, to applying to jobs for you, Professor Services equips you to nail your job search. Don't stress over the job hunt. Maximize your potential and crush your next opportunity with support from our team of experienced administrators, mentors, and educators. Discover how the team at Professor Services can help. Visit professorservices.com today to get started and kickstart your career in higher education.